what's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 39 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of somatic embodiment work with our very special guest of the week, Devon. Be sure to go follow Devon over on TikTok. Her TikTok is Devon Caley. That is DevonCaleyy. Make sure to go check her out after the episode and show her some support for being on this podcast. And remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in the podcast Discord along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. And just a quick disclaimer before we start, I am not a licensed health professional. This podcast only seeks to create community and further understanding of these topics that are so often overlooked and extremely misunderstood. If you or a loved one are in need of medical professional help, we have so many different resources in our description. The topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. So today we're talking about somatic embodiment work. Somatic embodiment work is a type of therapy that uses the body as a tool for healing through self-awareness, mindfulness, connection, self-regulation, finding balance, and creating self-acceptance. It is a body-centered form of therapy that explores the connection between the body and the mind, and it examines how stress and trauma are trapped within our body and how that impacts our body. Somatic embodiment work empowers us to find freedom from psychological, emotional, and physical distress through various body-based practices such as breath work, yoga, and massage. Embodiment work helps a person connect with their body, enabling them to access and process difficult memories, reclaim lost parts of themselves, and inhabit a wellspring of information and resources that their body contains. So somatic therapy, aka somatic experiencing, was originally developed by Peter Levine in the late 1970s. It was conceptualized as an alternative to other trauma-focused therapies, which, although effective for some people, didn't work for everyone. Somatic experiencing may allow you to revisit the trauma without recalling specific events and emotions. When you practice these body-focused exercises, you focus on physical sensations instead of thoughts and emotions as you would do in talk therapy or fears in exposure therapy. Somatic experiencing also helps you realize that you've been stuck in fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. This could lead to symptoms of chronic stress in addition to those linked with trauma. One of the main goals in somatic experiencing is to develop a body-mind connection and increase your ability to regulate your emotions. This can help you manage some of your most distressing symptoms. Emerging research suggests that somatic therapy can be effective for people who've experienced trauma. So today, we're going to be discussing what that looks like with Devon. Again, viewer discretion is advised in all of my episodes because I'm not a licensed health professional, but I want to talk about these things. We should have an open discussion. So in the comments down below, tell us if you've ever done somatic therapy or any other kind of therapy. Also, if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe down below so that you can get more notifications whenever we post a new video. And just a quick reminder, we post new episodes every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends. It helps us out a lot, helping the channel grow, helping you grow, and helping other people grow. Now, let's get into this episode. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much.
So your name is Devon. Introduce yourself to the class.
Okay, so hi, my name is Devon. So I'm a therapist and currently a third year doctoral student studying clinical psychology. And I post a lot on Instagram and TikTok just about various mental health topics.
Amazing. It's so nice to meet you, Devon. I'm Grace. I am not a therapist.
That's totally fine. I feel like everyone has wisdom and insights that are important to bring to the table.
I like that you said that because, oftentimes I have to always give that disclaimer for the podcast. Like, I am not a licensed health professional, okay? But I know a lot. I do a lot of research and I bring people on that know a lot more than me. And so I get to learn with everybody else. And it's very exciting.
Mhm.
So exciting. So today we're talking about somatic embodiment work. Tell me, what is somatic embodiment work?
So somatic embodiment work is, I feel like maybe a good place to start is I feel like there's a lot of people who say like they've been in talk therapy, they've tried talk therapy, and that's not always necessarily helpful for them. And I think it's only one piece of the equation when we talk about healing, where, stage one is like, how can we talk about things if we don't even really understand what's happening in our body or how to be in the present? And basically, from the beginning of our lives, like especially in the United States, like especially in Western cultures, like we are conditioned to disconnect from our bodies, to deprioritize our own feelings in favor of productivity and accomplishment, where just anything that brings us our own sort of pleasure or enjoyment tends to be seen as, frivolous. Like, rest is often discouraged. We feel a lot of guilt if we take time for ourselves, or everybody has a side hustle because something has more value if it's, monetizable. I don't know if that's a word, versus just something that we do for our own enjoyment. And, our bodies, a lot of times, like especially for women, our body becomes a social tool rather than a home that we get to experience all the wonderful facets of the world through. And so if we're not able to see past all of that to figure out like what am I even feeling or experiencing to begin with? Like how can we start that healing journey?
Oh, I love that. Our bodies are a little home. Dude, I agree with literally everything you said because yeah, I mean, I was raised in a Jamaican Christian household, and I like to give that disclaimer because my Jamaican grandparents really did raise me and they're immigrants.
Mhm.
And I was told 100% of the time, at least 50 times a day, that I was too dramatic, that my feelings were too big, that I was doing too much, and that I needed to calm down and chill out
Mhm.
because, you know, I feel a lot and I express it, and I've never calmed down or chilled out once. Like it was like fruitless for them to tell me all the time, but
Mhm.
they still did. They still did. And I did notice that both of my brothers really took their words to heart. And it is very hard for them to express anything at all, like at all, at all. And when
Mhm.
our dad died and we were at our dad's funeral, my youngest brother, who is, I think, 15 or 16 at the time, finally cried for the first time. And I remember it like as if it was a shock because, of course, he would cry, but he never cried. Nobody ever cried. And the only thing that started to make him cry, because nobody in our family cries, that wasn't a thing. The only thing that made him cry was my dad's best friend when he got up to give, a eulogy, bursted into tears as soon as he stepped on the stage and said my dad's name. And then that kind of set a wave towards me and my siblings where we started to cry. And I finally thought to myself, I should be able to cry. This is horrible. We lost our dad. He was so very young. This is horrible. And, nobody else in my family cried. I've never once seen my Mimi, who's my dad's mother, or my papa cry. And it wasn't until I left the funeral, and I started to recognize that because everybody was being so jovial and around in the funeral, but nobody was crying. And they're like, "Oh, we're supposed to be joyful because, he's in heaven now." And I just felt this huge sense of loss walking back into my house, and my dad wasn't there. And there's so many pictures of my dad and he wasn't there. And it felt like we weren't allowed, at home to express that grief.
Mhm.
And it took me a very long time to like physically express that grief. And I started getting seizures and other horrible like headaches, like mind numbing headaches. I couldn't see sometimes that they were so bad. And my fiance pointed out to me, he's like, "You need to grieve. You need to grieve." And it eventually got so bad, like the seizures got so bad that he was like, "Okay, you're going to quit your job's and you're going to stay home for a bit and you're just going to grieve." And that did so much for me to be able to grieve for a while. It was a lot longer than 2 weeks, let me tell you. But I don't think if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't quit my job, if I hadn't just stopped and grieved, dude, I don't know what would have happened. I don't think I would have been able to function.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't
I feel
know.
like, yeah, there's like a few like layers there too. Like I had just read something recently that was like learn to listen to your body's whispers so that you don't have to navigate its screams. And like I feel like again, like there's this, yeah, like being dramatic or like being told that you're too much. Like it's really hard to give yourself permission to just feel things as they're coming up. But it's like every emotion is a messenger of a need in our body, and the magnitude of that emotion matches the magnitude of the need beneath it. And so if we have to just talk ourselves out of everything we're feeling, like even like with therapist hat on, every time you say, the word should, like my mind goes to like you're comparing yourself to something that you've heard before or been told before, like what we should be doing, how we should be grieving, how we should be feeling things. But like everybody's body is unique and everybody is going to experience the world differently based on the context of their own experiences. But I'm really glad that you had, yeah, the space and I think the permission sometimes that we need just to be able to let your body grieve the way that you needed to. And I literally, this is another side tangent, but when we talk about crying, and especially when we get that message that we can't cry, I have a sticker on the bottom of my laptop here of Sailor Moon. And I don't know if you've ever watched the anime Sailor Moon, but one of the reasons that Sailor Moon is literally one of my favorite heroes is like a lot of times on the show, like she'll cry right before there's a big like battle scene or before she has to save the day. And everybody kind of like, yeah, sees like Usagi as this kind of airheaded character, but I'm like, based on science, I'm like, she actually can be a better hero because she takes the time to cry before she has to like, fight whatever villain is like on that episode where cortisol, the stress hormone, is in our tears. And so as we're crying, we are actually regulating our body and our nervous system. And it is like one of the most natural ways that our body tries to just regulate ourselves, like when we're feeling any type of overwhelm. And so like when we just like are forced to hold all of that in without any sort of outlet, like that's really heavy.
Oh, it is so heavy. And I like how you pointed out cortisol. I have a service dog. Her name's Gigi.
Oh,
And I trained her for my seizures. They were always brought on by immense stress. And so the way that I trained her was she smells cortisol levels. She smells when they're way too high. It's really cool. And
amazing.
she would alert me when my stress was too high. And if I had a seizure, she'd bring me down to the ground and then lay on top of me and have like her weight. She's like 65 pounds. She heavy girl. Her weight kind of soothed me. And it really, whenever she did lay on me, I would cry and cry and cry and cry. And she has saved my life countless times. And now, because I bring her with me. I sell crystal beaded jewelry every weekend, and I bring her with me to the vendor events. And I usually have her on a leash, but I'm not holding the leash, let's be honest, because she's not going to go anywhere. So sometimes she'll find certain people that she smells are really stressed out, and she won't leave their sides until they pet her and they start to calm down. And I've had like countless people tell me, "Oh my gosh, this dog is amazing. She's so sweet." They're like, "I feel so much better now." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what she was trained to do." And now she's like, "My mom is practically healed. Let me go heal everybody else."
That is so sweet. And I literally didn't even know that, yeah, that you could train. Like, I'm very curious, yeah, like how she knows, but that's amazing.
Dude, it took 2 years. It was a long time. So it wasn't just immediate. It took 2 years, pretty intense training because there's a lot of other training that you have to do for the service dog to be a service dog. They have to be task trained, and there has to be at least 3 different tasks. And so every service dog is trained differently based on the disabled person. And so Gigi is a PTSD service dog. And I was
Mhm.
diagnosed with PTSD a very, very long time ago. And so when we got Gigi, we actually got her for my mother. And then my mom was like, "Oh, I don't need a dog. I don't need a dog." Like she only liked Gigi when Gigi was a puppy, but Gigi was starting the task training as a puppy.
Mhm.
And Gigi like bonded with me over my mom like really instantly anyway. And so I think that also made my mom a bit jealous, but I'm going on a tangent. So me and my dad started task training her for different things. She could open the trash and throw away trash. She does this little chortle. It's like growling, almost grunting, but she's like talking. It's so weird, but she would like talk whenever she needed to go outside or go anywhere. And she's very good at like, you got to train a dog to like sit, lay down, roll
Mhm.
over. She does all of those. She gives high fives. She knows how to hold your hand. So there's like a like difference between that. But it just takes a lot of time. But what I did was, your adrenal glands are right on top of your kidneys. So whenever I sensed myself getting stressed out, I taught her to start pointing her nose to my adrenal glands.
Mhm.
And that was, reward, reward every time she did that. And then I trained her to be in the store with me, right? And so I have to teach her to, leave it, ignore other people, and then watch me. And she would alert whenever she was like, "Oh, you starting to get stressed out." And so she would alert for that. And then I taught her like transitioned the alert from her poking my belly to her flipping my hand up. So my hands are like right by where my adrenal glands are anyway, the way that my body is compositioned. And so she's a little short, but she will flip up my hand anytime she senses that I'm stressed out, or she'll get right in front of me and make me stop. So that's how I started to train her. But again, it took a long time. But
Mhm.
she's now like one of the most behaved dogs ever. And we recently got a puppy for my fiance. We rescued a puppy. And so I'm starting to train her. But Gigi is now recognized. She's like, "I could be a dog for a while." And so now she's like, anytime that she doesn't have her vest on, she acts crazy. She does not act like her normal self. She's like, "I'm gonna act like this puppy." And now people think that she's a puppy every time I take her to the dog park because they're like, "She does not act, she's 7. She does not act like she's a 7-year-old dog." No, she acts like she's like a 5-month-old puppy, like her new little sister. And so it's like night and day, drastic difference of how she interacts. And all of my family are really crazed by it too, because, they always saw her like being a normal dog. And then when they started seeing her in public, they're like, "What is this? What is going on?" She won't look at me. She won't listen to any of my commands. Like, she's just watching you the entire time. I'm like, "Yeah, because she's a service dog." They didn't believe me for the longest time that she was one. They were like, "Nah, nah, you're lying." I'm like, "Just wait, just wait." But yeah, she's pretty cool.
Really cool. That's amazing. And yeah, admirable. I think we're training her and now doing it again. where, yeah, it's really important, I think, to have as many resources as we possibly can. And yeah, that's amazing.
I agree. Getting as many resources as we possibly can. And that's part of the reason why I do this podcast is because when I was really in the depths of despair, I had no one to turn to. It was
Mm.
COVID. I was, living at home, and then my dad got hit by a car, and then my mom and dad were in the hospital constantly, and I had no one again. And then I had to move my brother and myself back to college. And it was just me and Gigi, and then my ESA Clark Kent. He's my cat. He was the best little dude. He died, but he was amazing, amazing. But I had already been diagnosed with severe anxiety and PTSD. So my cat, before Gigi became a certified service dog, before she had completed all of her training,
Mhm.
I brought my cat with me to college, and he would do the same thing of laying on top of me whenever I was really stressed out. But I didn't train him. He just
Mhm.
knew. He just knew.
People
He was so
sleep on
great.
how intuitive cats are. Like, I feel like they know just as much as dogs do, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize how intuitive cats are in that way,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. He was the sweetest little dude there ever was. And he and Gigi we got them at the same time. So when Gigi lost Clark, she was devastated, but that was also when she started to complete her training. And it's almost like she took up that mantle of like responsibility almost. But yeah, I lived in the dorm with my Clark, and I had, my ESA letter from my doctor and everything. And it was really, really crazy and really, really hectic. And I was so depressed. And I kept trying to talk to my friends about what my friends, quote, quote, about what was going on. No one wanted to talk to me about it. Like, people would tell me that I was, again, being dramatic, or
Mhm.
that everyone has problems, Grace, or that, I can't handle your stress, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't want you to solve my problems. I just want someone to talk to. And I
Mhm.
felt really, really, really alone. And so I started doing like all this research, and I thought to myself, I need to share this with people. I'm sure there's people like me who feel stuck. And so I made a Discord server, which was anonymous, and, started sharing what I was going through and finding, all the resources that I found. I would put them on the Discord. And then it just kept growing and growing. And I was like, I should start a podcast. And so I did. And essentially, yeah, I provide, all the resources that I find, which are all free. And it's been a great journey, and I feel so much more healed and so much more capable to like do this, because originally I felt really overwhelmed by all of this. I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified. And I'm not qualified, but also I am qualified as someone whose experience has lived experiences of these things and has worked through it. And
Mhm.
so that's why I bring people like you on, who have like, the degrees and also lived experiences, to talk about what you're going through. And are you comfortable with sharing your experiences?
Yeah, I'm definitely comfortable with sharing mine too. And yeah, again, I'm gonna say like don't underestimate where it's like if you want like advice, it's like, wisdom is knowledge and lived experience. And you have a lot of wisdom on these topics. And like, would you want to talk about it with someone who like doesn't get it, or like with someone who's been through something similar and kind of already, like, even if you're just one step ahead going through it, like you're able to kind of be that beacon for people that are looking to be on the same path. And I think with everything that you're highlighting too, part of why somatic and embodiment work is so important is like we lose our sense of agency when we lose ourselves. Again, like based on all those messages that we're receiving, that something about the way that we're showing up in the world is just wrong. And so it's like there's building relationship again with yourself, because like if we don't know ourselves, like we're going to look for external things to make decisions for us or decide who we are for us. And then we kind of take it out like the next step. And then it's like, we need relationships with safe other individuals in order to like sometimes, so it's like a side tangent because I was like, that's my like, I don't want to get on a soapbox look, but I have a beef with the advice that it's like you can't be in relationship with other people until you love yourself first. But it's like if you don't see yourself as lovable through the eyes of someone else, like it's so difficult to perceive ourselves that way, especially if we've had experiences that challenge or negate that. And so it's like we need safe relationships. And then it's like taking that scope out one more degree, it's like we need community also, where it's like we are designed to be in community. We're not designed to be as isolated and disconnected as we are now. And like if you look at like mismatched disorders and diseases, like part of it is like our body is not designed for this world, just as far as like the abstract variety of like, threats and all of the uncertainty and things that are coming up, like our body's not designed to do all of this. And so like to take time to regulate our nervous system and take care of our body almost means like going against a lot of the systems that are in place. And, you know, for me too, I think I spent a lot of time. I think I'm still on the journey of coming back home to my body and who I am. And I think part of the reason that you came across my page is I had a video series that went viral on TikTok talking about childhood emotional neglect. And for me, that was such an important piece because, like, in my healing journey, there was something missing and I couldn't figure out where the piece was. And I was like, maybe it's, my relationships in adulthood, or maybe it's like, something else. But with everything that I know about attachment styles and relationships, I'm like, there's got to be something different, something that I'm missing. And also my parents like know all about the series. So if I like talk about them, like they're totally fine with it. And I think there's, an important intergenerational piece to acknowledge. Like it's not about blaming them, but it's about the context of, how we're showing up in the world. And I was like, I had parents who put a roof over my head and, they put me in all of the classes that I wanted to. And, they told me that I could do and be anything that I wanted. But based on the trauma that my parents had experienced growing up, like they couldn't emotionally show up for me. And so I was also a very anxious child, and like it was kind of made to be problematic, or when I was, crying, like there wasn't necessarily someone there who knew how to nurture or soothe me, where I was kind of like I would go and like isolate myself and be like, I have to figure out how to handle this alone. And it was really challenging for me to understand how to take up space in relationships, especially when I'm experiencing something uncomfortable. It's very difficult to me to ask for help, to show someone my vulnerabilities or to show someone my flaws. And, you were kind of talking about some of your friends in college, and I kind of coined this term steamroller friends because there was a point where I had to look around and realize the reason I'm so lonely all the time is because so many of my relationships are now dependent on this version of me who doesn't take up space, who doesn't know how to be a separate individual, doesn't know necessarily how to like speak up for myself or think for myself or do anything else. And so it literally felt like ripping my life apart, like from the ground, and building it back up just to be me, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And steamroller friends. That's such a good little term. Okay, I would keep it. I'm gonna put it
You can have
in,
it.
in my little box because yeah, I did have that. I was in theater my
Mhm.
entire life. So I started theater at like before I could talk, essentially. And I started professional theater by the time I was 3.
Mhm.
So my mother had me in kind of embodiment work, but it was very different. It was embodying character. It was embodying everything but me. And
Mhm.
so when I went to Texas Tech University for my theater degree, I graduated high school with my associates. So I went in as uh like I think it's a junior-ish, and I was younger than everybody else. And, everybody had their own groups, of course, but theater, everybody knows everybody because it was a very difficult program to get into. They only accepted 7 students per cohort. So the cohorts were, stage design, lighting, sound, um, acting, directing, um, dance, etc. Right?
Mhm.
There was only 7 per each cohort, so it was very small. I was accepted into BA in theater. So I had an overarching degree, which was what I wanted. I wanted to know everything I could. So I took all of the classes, and I mean I took all of the classes. Like I was in it. I was so excited because I wanted to become a director, which I still do. I want to be a film director. So I felt like I needed to learn every single thing. So, because of that, my the dean of the college was like, "Okay, I love Grace Taylor. Grace Taylor, I'm going to put you in BFA classes because of your willingness to learn and take on as much as you possibly can to learn and grow." He's like, I appreciate that in a student. So, you're going to go into the BFA classes and you don't have to pay as much for them as all the other students, which pissed people off. It pissed other people off.
Mhm.
And most students had to audition to stay in the program every single semester. He didn't let me do that. I asked if I could. He was like, "No, you're in it." And so that also pissed people off. I acknowledge this. I was given special treatment. Did I deserve it? Yes, I did, because I worked very hard for it. And there were four other students that also got the same type of special treatment as I did. So it wasn't just me. There were other students that had the level of just, I'm going to work, I'm going to work, I'm going to work. And because of this, because I was in BFA classes of all different, you know, categories, I got to meet a lot of different people. And I really wanted to make friends so desperately because my entire childhood, I was moved from school to school. I was not moved from home. I went to 14 different schools growing up. So I thought, college, finally, I'll get my people. I'll get to find my group and find the people that will support me and love me. And so I did everything in my power to be there for every single person that ever asked me anything, which is not good. Don't ever do that, people, because because whenever they would ask me like, "Oh, hey Grace, could you help me with this piece?" I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm on it." "Hey Grace, can you help me move?" "Yeah, I'm on it." "Hey Grace, can you help me with my homework?" "Yeah, I'm on it." I was like kind of booked solid. Like I hardly had any time to sleep. Sleep, psh, what is that? And I also hosted parties constantly, or gatherings of every kind. I was always that house where everybody came over. And my roommate in college, in our apartment, um, for what okay, here's what happened. So I started to get really burnt out, right? Of
Mhm.
course, you're gonna get burnt out.
And not sleeping.
And not sleeping. I was burnt out. And also, my dad was hit by a car and we didn't know whether he was going to die or not. And so I hadn't told everyone knew that my dad was hit by a car because they did make an announcement that I would be going home every other weekend to all of my classes. They made that announcement. The dean just went from class to class to class being like, "Grace will not be here on weekends. Do not sign her up for anything on weekends. She's not going to be here. You have to excuse it because they're extenuating circumstances."
Mhm.
So everybody knew. So one weekend that I wasn't gonna go away, it finally hit me like a ton of bricks, like all the stuff that I was going through. My mother is also extremely abusive in all of the ways you can be. And she, the weekend prior, had told me that my dad was gonna die, and it would be my fault if I missed his final moments. And I had the most horrible panic attack of my life. I started to slam my head into the concrete, gave myself a huge hematoma. I blacked out everything else. My boyfriend at the time hospitalized me, which good for you, bro. Good job. The only good thing he ever did in that relationship. So I was
Mhm.
hospitalized for like a week.
Mhm.
I don't remember any of it because they sedated the hell out of me. But when I got out, they also put an ankle monitor on me, which is like unheard of. I don't know why. I still don't know why they did.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I don't know why. They didn't take it off for a couple months, which whatever. And so I got back to my apartment and I told my roommate, she was like, "Hey, where were you?" And I said, "I was in the psych ward." She's like, "Why?" And I said, "I think I tried to commit suicide." And she was like, "What?" And I said, I think I tried to commit suicide. Can I have a hug? And she was like, I guess. And she half-assed hugged me. And then she told everyone that I had tried to commit suicide. And I don't know how it went around, but it basically went around that I was trying to seek attention. That's how like the train got to eventually, that I was just trying to seek attention. And so her birthday party was the week later. So I did everything in my power to make sure it was a great birthday party. It was a costume party. Everyone dressed up as their favorite anime character. So I was Rem, best girl. Um, and I bought my outfit, bought my costume, everything. And at the towards the end of her party, my boyfriend was supposed to pick me up to take me to a therapy session because for my release, they signed me up for these intensive therapy sessions on the
Mhm.
weekends. And so he was going to pick me up. So I left, I guess they thought in the middle of the party. I was like, bye, guys. And I went with my boyfriend, which he was taking me to therapy, but I didn't tell anyone that I was going to therapy because it's none of their damn business. And
Well,
so,
especially if they responded to the first part. Like, yeah, it'd
yeah.
be
So
anyway.
after therapy, I get back home. No one is there. There is throw up all over the ground. There are spilled beer cans. There's red solo cups everywhere. My crock pot is still on to the point where the bottom of the crock pot split in half because it got so hot. Like there's trash everywhere. And all of my picture frames of all of my friends with me and them, and they're all gone. My room is open. I go into my room, my drawers have been opened. Like none of my stuff is missing, but they went through my drawers and everything. And I'm like, what is going on? I was so confused. My cat Clark looked really sick, so I thought he ate something, which he died a couple months later. So I'm assuming he probably ate something and died from that. That's what I'm assuming because he was in my room and I was always shutting the door so that he couldn't get out, but my room was open, so I think he got out. Um, so Gigi, my service dog, started growling all the time whenever we would go like in the living space where everything was. And so I was like, okay, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Something has happened. And so, of course, I start cleaning everything up because overfunctioner, clean everything up. Everything is spotless. It takes me a couple hours. By the time I'm done cleaning, it's 3 a.m. I'm like, okay, I need to go to sleep. No one is still home. I had 3 other roommates. No one is home. No one came home for a while, like a couple days. And when this girl finally came home, she did not talk to me. She did not look at me, didn't do anything. And I tried to talk to her and be like, hey, a couple of my cooking stuff is broken. Can you please pay me back for this? And she was like, sure, I guess. And she never did. She moved out the next week. She didn't tell me she moved out. So I had to pay her portion of the rent. Yeah, sucked. But essentially, she then told everybody that something, because no one talked to me ever again in our friend group. None of them, except for one guy who told me no one wants to be attached to a sinking ship, Grace. Yep. Yep.
There are so many question marks in my head right now. I don't even know what to say next.
I know, because I was like, what happened? And so I eventually moved out of that place and told them I was moving out because my dad was dying. He was like, Mom, the doctors had a huge meeting with everyone in our family saying that he needed to go to hospice because he would never ever recover. He was dying. And so I packed up all my stuff. I moved out. I gave my keys back. My apartment complex said I didn't move out, and they tried to send stuff to collections, which I'm never going to pay because I signed all the paperwork with the leasing office and they had my dad's death certificate and they knew I moved out. But, fraudulent bitches. Anyway, so when my dad died, I had spent, it was October. I had done all of my finals early, so I passed all of my classes and all of my teachers understood everything. I passed all my classes. And I, again, with my boyfriend, who's my fiance now, he was like, you need to not go back to school. You need to not work. You need to not do anything. You need to stop. You need to stop and take a break. And I did. And I'm so thankful for him, enabling me to do that because bills exist. I He's had to take on all of that on his own. That's stress. That's stressful. But he knew that I was not physically capable of doing anything because I had worked really hard for a very long time, just constant go, 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 go. And my body was kaput. Couldn't do
Yeah.
anything. And for this episode, I've been doing a lot of research on embodiment work. And I remembered a lot of stuff that I did in theater where we would do embodying characters, and you go from the tip of your head to your toes of how you can unload like so much stress. And something clicked in my brain of like, I already know how to do this, but now I have to do this for me and not for like a character that I'm portraying.
But sometimes that like one step removed is like really helpful too, especially for more vulnerable emotions or experiences. With like I know there's like some beef with Bessel van der Kolk, but I'm still gonna bring up The Body Keeps the Score. And like at the end, they talk about like all of the important work with embodiment that they've done, like specifically related to drama classes, like for therapy, and how there is therapeutic work involved, like with a lot of the exercises that you do like even like the mirroring exercises, and like those are important embodiment tools, and doing body scans, and like where do you feel this emotion in your body, what does this emotion feel like, so that you can portray it for someone else. And sometimes doing it as a character is less vulnerable than doing it as yourself, and so you're still building the same skills, but it's a little less scary to start with.
Yeah, I get that. And I teach acting and singing lessons now. And within my singing lessons, I always tell them, okay, where does this sound resonate from? Are you doing it from here? Is it from up here, right here? Or is it from down here? And that has helped a lot of people. And then with my acting classes, like, where do you feel this emotion? Where are you feeling fear? Who is this character? We got to unpack literally everything about this character. Where does this character feel fear? Do they feel it in their toes? Are they constantly on the tips of their toes? So they're keeping quiet as they're walking for fear that someone might hear them? Are they keeping the fear in their shoulders? So their shoulders are hunched over. They're trying to make themselves smaller. And oh, I've learned so much that has equipped me so that I can teach. And dude, this is so much fun. So like there's different aspects of somatic embodiment work. There's the introceptive, like the internal awareness of the body. There's a proprioceptive. I hope I'm saying that right.
Proprioception.
Say it again.
Proprioceptive.
Proprioceptive, the spatial orientation of the body, where you are in space, how you are taking up the space, and kinesthetic, the movement of the body. And all of these things are really, really cool. I'm also going to put all the research that I've done in the description. So if anybody wants to do some more like reading, you can, because it's a lot of fun. But according to my research, unlike other forms of therapy, somatic embodiment work intentionally avoids directly evoking traumatic memories and therefore does not focus on thoughts and feelings related to the traumatic experience. And that's really interesting. Would you like to unpack that for me?
Yeah, so I have kind of this the way that I kind of explain like the individual experience is like everything stems from a need. So there is like something that your body needs at any given time, and then an emotion is an energy within your body that's indicating something that you need. A thought is a language interpretation of the things that we're feeling in our body. So our thoughts and the tone of them tend to follow what we're feeling. And then behavior is the way we try to either meet that need or quiet and avoid that need. And so we kind of always like follow this progression with like anything that we're doing. And so many times we get stuck in the thought and putting so much meaning on what we're thinking and accepting that as a truth or accepting it as a fact. And, it can be your truth and your experience, but things get so convoluted. I feel like as soon as thoughts come in the equation. And so it's like, how do we just listen to the feeling? And so even talking about singing, where it's like some different types of embodiment exercises and things that like we can do are like humming. And sometimes it's like humming and even with just like a finger kind of like pressed at the center of your chest, like just, I don't know if people can see, but I have my index finger like in the center of my chest. And so it's just like helping focus like your awareness of that specific sensation of your body. For me, it's like you can probably tell how I'm feeling based on if you go through my Spotify, how many times Taylor Swift's All Too Well 10-minute version is there. And I think just like even like just scream singing, like you don't have to be good and just doing it. I also love intuitive movement. Where it's like again like with dance it's like you're doing specific choreography, there's kind of like a certain aesthetic or like a certain move that you're trying to achieve, versus intuitive movement is just like what does your body need to do in the space that you're in right now. And just being able to build a different awareness for our body where it's to the point sometimes like based on if someone's experienced trauma or how disconnected they are from their body, like they don't even have that awareness of where is my body in space and like what is my body doing. And if we can't listen to, our emotions, it's like we also start to miss cues like, am I hungry? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Am I hot? Am I cold? Or yeah, are my shoulders like super hunched? Like, do I have a headache? Is my jaw super clenched? And so like as we practice coming back home to our body, we can start to be aware of all of these different cues. And then we're able to meet our needs, which is just like such a big act of self-love, being able to come back home to like this vessel that is yours. And I feel like there's another piece that I wanted to include in there about it. But yeah, there's definitely like those three important different layers. Where it's like for embodiment work, it's like even just like laughter. You talked about your dog, Gigi, and part of it is like even just like co-regulating. Where I think sometimes people have difficulty with co-regulating because they're like, if I'm stressed and then I go into someone else's space, like I'm taking the stress out of me and putting it into them. But it's like, nope, like your body just tends to like match like the physiological processes of someone who's lost stress. And so it's like your heart rate will slow to match theirs, your breathing will slow to match theirs, and you're not like increasing their stress, you're just decreasing yours. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can, yeah, regulate our nervous system and use embodiment to just improve, yeah, how do I feel within the bounds of who I am? Like what's happening outside of the bounds of who I am with the space that I'm in. And just like, yeah, how am I feeling at any given time?
Exactly. And whenever I like start an acting or a singing lesson, both of them, I always tell people to roll their shoulders back and then reach up and around. And we do like a couple little stretches because it helps so much. And I call it getting back into your body because a lot of times when you're about to do a class, like really stressed, like well, oh, especially performance, you're really stressed about how am I going to perform? Like, am I going to do this wrong? Blah 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 blah. And so for me, what has always helped me, especially helping all of my students, is okay, let's roll your shoulders. You're just going to copy me. And every single voice lesson, we begin with humming because it helps coat your vocal folds rather than, going straight into the singing. And that's why, vocal warm-ups are so good, are so helpful. I teach them a new vocal warm-up every single time. It's so much fun, but there are different exercises. Grounding is one of them. Grounding
Mhm.
exercises help you center and anchor yourself to the present moment, and this could help take your mind off past events that are causing you distress. Grounding may be particularly helpful if you're experiencing flashbacks, anxiety, and disassociation symptoms. Do you
Mhm.
have any grounding techniques that you personally like?
Yeah, I have a few, and I love the way that was worded, where it's like I say, like anxiety pulls us into the future, depression kind of pulls us into the past, but the one place where we have control is the here and now. And it's like no matter what modality of therapy you use, like they're all trying to give you like that space and like bring you to the here and now where we actually have control. And so there's kind of a few things that I think can help with grounding. My favorite one that I pretty much give to everyone is called 5 4 3 2 1. And it's going through your senses from the most broad to the most refined. And so it's like, what are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste, and going into as much vivid detail as you can of the space that you're immediately in. And sometimes it's even just if you're feeling too overwhelmed for counting or that, it's like, what's like the furthest sound that you can hear? And then what's the closest sound you can hear? Like, what's the furthest thing you can see? What's the closest thing you can see? And sometimes I just say like even doing multiplication tables in your head where it's like when, our brain is very, very loud and it tends to be like, remember our thoughts or language interpretations of what we're feeling. If we kind of switch over into logic brain and you just kind of do like, even like what is 1 times 1? What is 1 times 2? What is 1 times 3? Where it's like that kind of like slows and brings us back to the here and now. I'm trying to think. I feel like there's another one that I always give people, but just even like deep breathing or counting anything. So it's like related to numbers or the senses or like anything that gives you like sensational awareness for where you are now. And so like for me, I really, really don't like needles or getting like shots at the doctor. And so like I'll literally just pick something in the room and I'll try to like count as many of that as I can, or I'll count like the ceiling tiles that are like in the office. But I think those are all like the main grounding techniques that I give people.
Dude, those are so awesome. And I want to give one more. This is a exercise that anybody can do. It's a vocal performance exercise, but it's a breathing exercise. It's called breathing in square. So you hold for whatever amount. Let's go with 4. You hold for 4 seconds. You inhale for 4 seconds. You hold for 4 seconds. You exhale for 4 seconds. And then you increase the second incrementally. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that helps me out all the time. It also helps expand your lung capacity. For those of you singers out there who want to expand your lung capacity in a natural way, it really, really helps. And another grounding exercise that I like to do is anchoring my feet. So you have 3 points of contact with your feet. You got your big toe and then the little toe and then your heel. And so I anchor myself. I make sure that I feel all of it onto the floor. And then I slowly reach up and slowly pull myself down as slow as I can. And then get my hand on the ground, both palms, fingers, everything touching the ground, and just hang like that and breathe. And then once I feel, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like tingles all the way up and down. And then I start to bring myself back up and then I rotate my arms down to my side. And that helps me so much because I've been diagnosed with panic disorder. So that helps me regulate myself of being aware of literally everything on my body and chill for a second. I'd be like, okay, I'm alive. I'm not dead yet. I have the ability to control myself and I'm okay. And it helps.
Mhm.
Another exercise is resourcing and visualization. Resourcing is about tuning into a specific body sensation that may be the opposite of what you're experiencing at the moment. This is typically a long process that a therapist helps you with, but practicing specific exercises at home could help aid you starting the process. So, they're like focusing on creating safe sensations in your mind and body to help relieve distress.
Mhm.
And it helps me out a lot. So it's like, here's some ways to start. Create a safe place in your mind. You can do this to going back to a time and place where you felt safe and happy. You could also come up with a new place that feels safe and happy that you may not have experienced yet. And you think about the colors, the smells, the textures, and you feel your body there and focus on how comfortable you feel. And then you think about the people that make you feel safe and you bring them into that place. And you could start that by looking at photos of them and focusing on specific memories that you share. So for me, I've done this exercise, especially around the loss of my dad. And I like to picture a very big wooded area that has some sparse trees in like one area with a lot of field, because my dad really liked to take us on hikes and stuff like that. And so then I picture my dad with me, and it takes me a little bit to see him, and then I just talk to my dad. And I just usually I do this outside, and I'll sit outside and I'll talk to my dad. And it helps out a lot, even though he's not, physically with me. In my brain, it creates the spiritual awareness that though his body may not be, on the earth anymore,
Mhm.
I know that his spirit is still with me. And
Mhm.
so that really helps me cry as well and feel all of those feelings of, my dad left me, but he still is with me because I am part of him. And so even though he's physically gone, he isn't really gone, because all the things that he taught me are still within me. I just need to allow myself the time and space to access them. And it has been very beneficial with my grief journey, because grief is very long, and you're going to be feeling grief, especially over losing a parent. I'm about to get married. I got engaged this past year, and I'll never have my dad walk me down the aisle. But what sounds really bizarre is I always knew that from when I was very little, and I would tell him, which I know sounds insane, right? That sounds insane, but I would tell him that I don't think he'll be there. And he'd be like, "Oh no, honey, of course I'm going to be there." But I think I always knew he was going to die young, which is also very weird. I acknowledge that is a very weird thing to
Or you just
think.
have really great intuition. I feel like the more we're in tune with our emotions, the more we can, lead into our intuition and sense those things.
Yeah. But I knew that he wouldn't be there. And so that loss of, he won't be there, I already knew it. And so I know a lot of people have told me that I've met recently, and they're like, "Oh, you're planning your wedding. Like, is your daddy gonna walk you down the aisle?" I'm like, "No, he won't be there." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Me too, but it's okay. That's life." And a lot of people are taken back by that. They're like, "Are you a psychopath?" No.
I can hold space for multiple truths.
Yeah. Oh, I can hold space for multiple truths. That is so good. That is so good. Oh, that's so good. And then the next one we're going to talk about is self-regulation.
Mhm.
This one was very hard for me to do.
Hard for everyone, I
uh,
think. And not to
so
invalidate, just it is challenging to do.
it is challenging. In general, emotional self-regulation is about guiding yourself through your emotions so that you can shift gears when they are leading you to feel distressed. Within somatic therapy, self regulation is about the nervous system. Unresolved trauma may lead to dysregulation of the autonomous, autonomous. I am bad at spelling because I'm dyslexic. I'm bad at reading, but the autonomic nervous system,
Yes.
okay. It means that you're on high alert all the time, like, ha 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 ha. In turn, you may react to everyday stresses and events in a way that's connected to your past trauma, like on extreme. So, for people that have severe PTSD, it's like that anxiety is on red alert all the time. So, you could be triggered by even the littlest of things. Like, for example, it's very hard for me to go to a grocery store, especially without Gigi,
Mhm.
because everything's very overwhelming. And I remember I usually use, the drive up with Target, so I have everything that I need and I don't have to go inside. But
Mhm.
one day they didn't put everything that I needed in there. And so I was like, oh no, I have to go inside. So I went inside. It was very busy. That was triggering for me because I got Gigi with me. And then a little girl ran up and tried to grab Gigi, like grab her leash from me. That was triggering. And so I just kept getting like overwhelmed, overwhelmed, overwhelmed. And then when I went up to the counter to say, hey, this wasn't in my bag, they're like, oh, we're out of it. And I was like, but I bought it. That was triggering. And I started to cry. I just started to cry. And I was like, okay, goodbye. And we just left as fast as we possibly could. And I got back to my car and I was like, I that was a big emotion for a not so big situation. And you know, as great as talk therapy is, to be able to talk yourself out of that, like working on your physical senses can help lead you to releasing and shifting the patterns versus, talking yourself. Because for me, logic brain, yeah, that exists, but my feeling brain is so big. It's so big. It's like logic brain is like right here. Feeling brain is like taking up most of the space. So for me to be able to feel those feelings is very, very helpful. And then once I feel them, I'm like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then I keep going, keep it pushing. And I think, the way that I was raised, I was talking about earlier, um, I was taught that my feelings were too big or that they were too much. Um, and my mother, which I've told is she's very abusive, she would lock herself in her room. Like when I say lock, I mean the door lock, another lock on her door, and then two of the chain locks. She would lock herself in her room, like from her children. She didn't want to be around us. And, we got really good at picking locks. So she got like the chain locks. So there's no way that we could get to her. And so she never, ever, and she still hasn't, she's a raging narcissist and she is diagnosed. She has never, ever held space for any of her children's emotions. Like she will think that she's never wrong and stuff like that. And so, you know, as a child, if I had any big emotions, she was going to leave me. And so I wasn't allowed to have big emotions. So now, reparenting myself, I allow myself to have those big emotions
Mhm.
because I need them. I need
Mhm.
them.
Well, and I feel like sometimes it even gets to the point where then like the emotion itself becomes the trigger, or it doesn't even have to be anything external, where it's like if we anticipate that like we're going to be abandoned or rejected or punished if we experience anything big, it's like that feeling itself then becomes the trigger. And as you were talking about the story, yeah, with like the item at Target, I was thinking of, I think it was literally yesterday, a quote where I literally had to stop and I was like, I think I actually screenshotted it on my phone because I was like, I really need to remember this. Um, okay, I'm gonna see if I can find it really fast.
It's okay. Take your
Yeah.
time.
It was like, high functioning doesn't mean that it's easy to carry. High functioning just means that like you've been able to like make yourself like socially digestible. And I was like, that is so true. Where like I think again in society, everything is designed to be as, productive and efficient as possible, that we don't have room for just curiosity for why people might be feeling the way that they're feeling, or if everyone's disconnected from their feelings. It's like we can only meet other people as deeply as we're willing to meet ourselves. And I have a metaphor that I found once that I love. And it's a Japanese proverb, where it talks about how everybody is a vessel. And there are some people that are teacups, and there are some people that are bowls, and there are some people that are buckets, and there are some people that are barrels. And you can put a teacup next to a barrel and see that it can't hold nearly as much as a barrel can, but when it's full and it can't take on anymore. And my sort of spin on that is we can like fluctuate between those vessels based on the resources that we have, like how we're eating, how we're sleeping, how's our support system, like are we feeling sick, what's happening? And like we judge ourselves so harshly for like I call it we're having a teacup day. um And so it's like when we're having teacup days, like we feel like we must not be trying hard enough, or we must not be working hard enough because we know what it feels like to show up as a barrel. But today we just can be a teacup, and that is our 100%. And that is our absolute best that we can do. And I think it's difficult, like, especially when we carry those messages that we've internalized about being dramatic, where like we just need to have room for teacup days. And sometimes things are going to be really challenging and they might seem easy, or it might seem like it's a little thing or something small, but it's not to you that day. And that's totally okay. And just being able to give yourself permission to feel those things, that it's not anything wrong with you. It's that sign that you need to rest
Mhm.
or nurture yourself.
Exactly, exactly. And a way that you can self-regulate is by holding yourself. And it's like you put your right hand on your left shoulder and your left hand on your right shoulder, and you just hug yourself. For me, I got big boobies, so this doesn't work as much. So I grab underneath my boobas and I hold my stomach and I rock back and forth. And I picture myself as a little tiny little baby in that rocking chair that was automatic that my dad got because even as a baby, I was wiling out. One time they said that I would not stop crying for 3 days straight, but I think it's starts with an N of some kind. But pneumonia, there we go. P, it starts with a P. I had pneumonia, so I was dying. And I was crying for 3 days straight. My body knew there was something wrong, but they didn't listen. And then once I was like actually dying, they were like, okay, we got to take her to the hospital. So eventually I got help. But since then, I think I was 6 months old at the time. Since then, I would cry constantly because I wasn't being picked up enough. And my dad, worked. So whenever he came home, immediately he'd pick me up and he'd hold me. And there are so many countless pictures of him asleep with me on his chest, even to the point where he died when I was 20, but the accident happened when I was 19. Like one of the last pictures that I have of me and my dad is me laying on his chest, and he would do that with both my brothers too. Of everybody cuddle daddy and hold on to dad. He was that type of dad. He would always pick us up. Our mom never did. Hardly ever touched us. I believe with everything in my being, she was not meant to be a mom. She did not want to be a mom. It was expected of her to be a mom. Our dad loved being a dad. But because my dad couldn't be home all the time, eventually he started taking me with him to work because my mom wouldn't take care of me. And he was like, okay, you're going to come with me. But he got this rocking chair because he noticed whenever I was in the car with him and not being held, I wouldn't cry because the car was moving. So he got the chair that rocked back and forth. So it was like it was holding me. So even still to this day, I'll hug myself under my boobage and rock myself back and forth because this helps soothe me. And
Mhm.
it it helps so much. And that's also why Gigi helps so much, is because Gigi puts that pressure on me that I need to
Mhm.
help me regulate. And I do consider Gigi having part of my soul. So maybe it is also self-regulation, but I don't know.
I think it is. And I think there's a lot of layers to that, or even just like the movement piece where it's like anything like rhythmic, anything that's like consistent or predictable, like is also helpful. Or it's like I also like there's like a nerve here kind of like with like acupressure that like helps settle the stomach. And so it's like if you just kind of like press and move in a circle, like right over the inside of either wrist works, like that can also help regulate. And like one of my like favorite psychology facts overall is like if you put a hand over your chest, it activates the same part of your brain as if you were receiving a hug. Like the physiological benefits are the same. And so it's like this is also like another powerful way to regulate the deep breathing that you were talking about. And then I don't know if you've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I kind of given the metaphor where it's like to trick like time, like in that movie, it's like you just have to do something random. And I feel like sometimes like that also just like shocks our nervous system, where it's like sometimes I just will literally like make people wave their hands in the air, or just like stand up and do 10 jumping jacks, or just like do some of these. And it might feel really random and out of the blue, but like just that movement itself, like, yeah, even just like rocking, it kind of like shakes our nervous system where it's like, oh yeah, like things are okay.
Like I exist in this space. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I do that too with my students. If when they're getting frustrated with a piece, I'm like, okay, let's wiggle. Let's wiggle our arms. Like we're
Mhm.
one of those things in front of the car, the inflatable dude. Go, yeah. And it helps so much to make them like stop. Like stop being so frustrated with yourself. You'll get it eventually. When you're frustrated with yourself, there's no way you're actually going to get it
No.
because there's like no way. It's a limiting belief. And once you limit yourself, you have limited yourself. You cannot exceed that limitation just
Mhm.
by, you know, willing it into being. You gotta work through it. And it's really interesting because as we're doing this episode, I'm like, I practice this all the time with my students. I'm such a good teacher.
So wise too.
I'm so proud of myself. I don't know, like some people would be like, Grace, come on. But no, you gotta accept whenever you've done something good and you gotta recognize it and be proud of yourself. And I have had so much limitation my entire life that I'm not gonna be that person that limits myself because that's not okay. It's not okay. It's not helpful. It's hindering, and I'm not gonna hinder myself anymore. Ain't no way.
When you have a lot to be proud, like I've been thinking like through as we've been doing this episode too, just like throughout, like I hope you're proud of yourself, just like the environment that you grew up in and the messages that you've learned. And now like you get to create this whole community where like one, you feel better and more in tune with your emotional experience. And two, you're inviting like a whole online community into that same space. Like I hope you're proud of yourself for the way that you've just, yeah, created all of this too.
Yay! I am so proud. Yeah. Because dude, all these people like I've made so many friends. First and foremost, like the guests that come on, I have like bonded with so many of them and we've become friends like outside of this that's like fire. That's awesome. And then the community that I'm building on Discord, where people are actively, I'm not even on there sometimes. And like people are sharing with one another and providing support for one another. I'm like, yes, thank you. Oh, that's so good. It's not like they're waiting around for me to respond. They're actively responding to one another and providing support to one another. And that makes me so happy. Like, I'm sure you understand that that's just like so great. And that gives me so much hope for, the future. If so many more people actively take the time to not just listen to themselves, but listen to others and allow space for others to feel, it creates this dynamic of mutual self-expression and love and community and compassion. And my
Mhm.
first ever episode was like, what is trauma dumping? And it was described as, info like dumping on someone who doesn't know how to accept it or understand it, doesn't know what to do with it. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's take trauma dump. Let's redefine it to mutually beneficial conversations where we are allowing someone the space to talk about what they're going through. And then we're also talking about what they're going through. We're providing resources for each other. And we can mutually grow and benefit from each and every conversation that you have. Even the negative ones that I've had with, the people that were so-called friends has taught me so much about myself and who I should allow in my space. I have learned so much and I know I didn't do anything wrong with telling, my roommate that, hey, I think I tried to commit suicide. And she didn't allow space for that. She completely rejected that. And I have thought in my brain of like, okay, well, I'm hoping for the best for her going forward, that she understands that that was not the right response. It was also very much not the right response to then say that to other people and
Mhm.
cause a huge rift in all of my other friendships to the point where, I really had no community. I transmuted that pain that anguish into my purpose. And I'm proud of it. And I'm so proud of it. What do you think of the saying transmuting pain into purpose?
Um, so I have a small business on the side that's literally called The Alchemy of Authenticity. And I feel like it's kind of that same principle where it's like when we can take, yeah, the negative things that have happened to us in our life, like we never have to be grateful for what happened to us, but like we can be grateful for the lessons that we learned from those experiences where like for me, it's taken like me going to my rock bottom to like completely illuminate the areas where I still need to heal. And if I hadn't done that, like I wouldn't come out on the other side the woman that I am now. And so it's like taking those experiences and turning them into something that has value, not even necessarily for other people, but just for us. Again, like with embodiment to come back home to, yeah, who we're meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like
Exactly.
a lot too, where like with what we're talking about, like how would our lives have been different if we had heard people having these conversations sooner or younger? But I think part of it is like, the wounds that we have are also the ways that like if we can figure them out in a healthy way, like those are our capability of like changing the world. Like that can be our purpose if we're willing to figure out how to heal those things for ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think of my dad, and something he would tell me all the time is his father, we called him Papa. It was like he would say, the Papa that you know is not the Papa that I knew, is not the father that raised me. And I wanted to make sure that I was the dad that would show up and would listen and support my kids and love them and guide them in a way that was constructive, but also that they would respect and acknowledge my authority, not just because I'm your dad and I have authority and you do what I say, but you understand that I was put on this earth to provide for you and protect you. And I'll demonstrate it in a way of what a man should be. And I have never met another man as capable and loving, compassionate, and wise and genuinely a genius as my dad. I've never met someone as smart as my dad. And I mean that. And I know that sounds like really braggadocious, but it's true. He was brilliant, brilliant. Everyone that knew him, he was brilliant. And he impacted so many lives for the good, not for the good of him, but the good of others. He put himself not last, but he put himself on the back burner constantly to make sure everybody was okay. And his loss is so great that so many people felt it. People that weren't even in our family, people that had just met him once or twice, that, throughout my life, people will recognize me and be like, "You're Mark Taylor's daughter." Like, yes, yes, I am. And they'll tell me like how much he has impacted their lives, like still to this day, even though he doesn't exist anymore on this earth, that he was such a great man. And that means so much to me. And my goal is to be, a little Mark Taylor of demonstrating what it is to love and show compassion and understanding. And he really was that. He was a human, he had his flaws, but no one could ever say that he did not love with everything that was in him. He loved. And, that's demonstrated in him loving my mom. I do not love my mom. She is not a good mom. She is not a good person, but he loved her. He saw goodness in her. And so within that, he even told my brothers, he was like, you may not like your mom, but I love your mom. And whether or not you agree with what she's doing, you still have to understand that she is my wife and I love her. And my brothers, I've started to see it demonstrated and how they're starting to love their girlfriends the way that my dad loved my mom. And it makes me so proud of the little men that they're becoming because they're starting to love like Mark Taylor. And genuinely, I'm so proud of them because, yeah, they're little dudes. They're like in their 20s. So they got some work to do. But they they are both very good men, and I'm very proud of the men that they are becoming because we had a good dad and they knew from our dad what it was to be a man, not domineering, not controlling, but loving, resourceful, respectful, considerate, compassionate. And, you know, my little tangent about Mark Taylor, but he was a very good dad. And so I live my life trying to embody that part of my dad, which is part of me, of being all those things. And he was like, you were named Grace for a reason. Your name means undeserved love and kindness and mercy. And he's like, you got to be your name. Okay. You got to demonstrate your name. He would tell me all the time, demonstrate your name. I have to keep doing it because I'm glad that I was named Grace. It is a very heavy name, like all that comes with it. But as I'm getting older and my capacity is growing as a human being, I've recognized that my capacity has grown um, emotionally and um, physically as well. I'm more able to do things that I didn't think I would be able to do. That I'm like, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
I have more capacity to show grace.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm glad he's taken up space because based on everything you're saying, it sounds like he's part of the reason that we're even here having this conversation right now. So, yeah, totally. Yeah, I think just as we age and grow, I think we just keep getting even more of that capacity. Where yeah, like when I think about embodied, like there was a few years ago, I made the decision during the pandemic to go and just go on my first solo trip. And so I like spent 6 weeks just on my own in Italy. And I think that was the first time that like one as an adult that I realized like I don't even necessarily really know who I am, but like time that I was able to have the privilege of getting to know myself and in a place that I wasn't necessarily like there's just when you're in an unfamiliar place like there's just even more I think that you learn about yourself and just how you handle things and navigate things and there were stressors and challenges and like I recognized the privilege of me being able to go and spend all of that time away and work remotely too but yeah I think that capacity just only continues to grow especially after we come to that point where we're like I don't necessarily know who I am and we have to build it again from the ground up because it happens for everyone, I think.
Yeah, it does happen for everyone. And I remember when I was very little that I was so very sure of myself, like to the umpteenth, so very sure of myself. And I am still sure of myself in that way. I was always very sure of my talent. I was always very sure of, my beauty. I was not vain, but I knew that I was a beautiful little kid, that I did not have any like insecurities that way until, like you get to middle school and then other people start to be like, "Oh, you fat." Nah. I'm trying to go back to that little grace of being so very sure of my worth and my value as just inherent. It just is. I just am, and that is good. And I am starting to get there again of just being like, I am a beautiful little human being and I appreciate myself. And it's not vain. It's not crass. It's not that I think I'm better than anyone.
Mm-mm.
No, it's accepting me and enjoying myself, and therefore I can enjoy other people. I've made a really good new best friend. Her name is Bailey. Shout out Bailey.
Oh, babe.
Bailey, hi Bailey. Bailey is one of the most genuine people that I have met in a long time of her. She's a girl's girl. She loves other women for them just being women, accepting other women for them just being women, being able to hold space for another person's beauty is so fantastic. Their talents, their gifts, everything. And she and I were talking in the car with my fiance in the back seat. We were both in the front seat because he has to go in the back seat. Anyway, we were at a drive-through and there was another girl that we saw, and we thought she was both really pretty, and we were remarking to each other of how pretty she was. And we're like, okay, we're gonna say at the same time that we like your hair, okay? Whenever she opens the window back. And we're like, okay, let's go. And then Joey, my fiance, is like, "What are you doing?" We're like, "We're gonna compliment her. Shut up." So she opened the window, and we were both like, "You're so very pretty," and that made her day. She was so excited, and we talked for a little bit. We're like, "We hope that you have like the best day ever, and we want you to know that you're doing great. You're doing amazing." And it made us feel so good, and I'm sure it made her feel so good because she is like so happy about it. Like her face lit up, which made her even more beautiful. And it was such a good little moment. And Joey was like, "Why did you do that?" It's like, "Because we're girls, because we gotta appreciate other girls." We're not competition. What is competition? Competition is insecurity. It's a deep-rooted insecurity. And that really
Patriarchy.
that's patriarchy, yeah. And that really changed something in my brain for a little bit of being like, hold up. This is the first time that I've had a girl best friend who is also a girl's girl, like I'm a girl's girl. And I felt so good and so happy. And I was like, Bailey, I love you. I like cried. It's like, you're just a good person. And I'm so blessed to know you and be around you. She's like, I'm blessed to know you and be around you too. Because I've had so many friends that I didn't know I was in competition with, but they apparently thought they were in competition with me. I didn't really recognize it until the friendship ended. And I have never really been the person to end a friendship. I was always the one getting abandoned, essentially. And, my most recent time that I've lost a friend is when I had to take a step back from her because she was starting to abandon me. She was supposed to be my maid of honor, and she stopped showing up for me like entirely for whatever reason. I won't get into it, but she started to treat me very poorly, and but still treat all the other friends that we had mutually very, very well. And I recognized it, and I told her that I recognized it, and then she got angry at me for whatever reason that I won't get into. And I was like, okay, well, I don't deserve to be treated this way. So I'm sorry. I wish you all the love and compassion, but you are not my friend anymore. You are not my maid of honor anymore. And I hope you get wherever you're going and get well, because I'm not going to accept mistreatment anymore because I don't deserve it.
Mhm.
And that moment of me doing that also creates something in my brain that's like, oh, it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate because I don't feel loss, but I feel loss for her because she is losing someone who was very much in her corner 100%. Always, always. Even when, my teacup was pretty empty, I still showed up to make sure that she knew I was still there. And I was like, hey, I can't provide very much for you, but I'm still here. And she decided that she didn't want me in her life anymore. So make my exit. It's okay. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. Also, I'm sorry if you, and then by you, therefore everyone is hearing a little bell in the background. My cat has since joined us and
Show
is
us the kitty.
come here.
Kitty
As a big hug.
cam.
I literally call my cat Papa after like the Papa's party. Come here. This is
Oh,
Max. Oh, he just wants
Max?
to play. This is Max. Max just wants to go play with his toy that has a bell on it. But he's here. He's joined us.
Hi,
Um,
Max.
and then also for both those stories, I feel like I was nodding so emphatically because I don't know if I've talked about this anywhere, but like literally my dissertation is on embodiment specifically with women. And like helping women just explore their own femininity in the context of other women and just like reclaim what it means to be a woman compared to like what we've been taught our entire lives. And so like I dig into like, yeah, the dynamics of like women's relationships as they age and grow up, like how we're conditioned to hate our bodies and see them as social tools again, rather than a home. And like just the complete misinformation I feel like that is out there just about like women's experience in general related to hormone health and our bodies and how, we weren't included in research. And so it's like the way that different disorders or diseases or ADHD or autism present in women is just very different than the way that it shows up for men. And like just that autoimmune diseases and certain cancers are on the rise in women just because we don't know how to take care of women's bodies. And so like all of this, yeah, a girl's girl through and through to the point that I'm researching like how to like help women have that space to just, yeah, reclaim what it means, I don't know, to be a woman. So I, yeah.
You're amazing. You are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that work. Like, oh my gosh, I've been in so many clinical trials since I became an adult, so like 20, because that's when like you can do a lot of clinical trials. And I started doing it because I was like, I'm traumatized and I want to try every single thing and get paid. And it one of the doctors, he's a man, he was talking about how underrepresented women are in general, especially plus size women, because I'm a plus size woman, and how they're
Mhm.
considered, you know, unhealthy. And he's put down his notebook and he was like, I just want to let you know that your body is not unhealthy. Like you are not an unhealthy weight for your body. You are not holding fat around your intestines to the point where it's dangerous. I just want to let you know that you are not an unhealthy weight. And this thing that's saying, oh, women need to be 25% body fat or under is not true. That's not true at all. Please don't hold space for that, is what he said. Because the clinical trial was for hypothyroidism, which I was diagnosed at 8 with hypothyroidism, which is crazy to be diagnosed at 8 with hypothyroidism, but I was. And he was talking to me about, a lot of women, especially now more than ever, are being diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And it's his research. He thinks it's correlated to stress. He thinks it's correlated to what we eat, number one, but a big part is stress and how much stress women take on in their bodies. And he was doing like all this blood testing and stuff for me, which, I have very, very tiny veins. Like that's another disease that I have, as part of the disease that I have, but my veins are very, very small. So it's very, very hard. You can't even see my veins. That's how small they are. It's very hard to find a vein all the time. And I've got diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So, on the regular, I was getting my blood tested every 6 months when I went to the doctor pretty regularly when I was a kid. And I had a lot of trauma around them sticking the needles in me and jiggling the needles to try and find a vein. Ugh, it's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad, to the point where they couldn't figure out how to help me because I was allergic to so much, like so much. And it wasn't until we did this trial that he really saw me and was like, hey, you're allergic to a lot of different things. You need to keep that in mind because a lot of these things are in everyday foods that Americans eat. And he's like, I know it's super stressful. They're like, oh, you got to change your whole diet, everything. He's like, no, make incremental changes, change one thing at a time, one thing at a time. And he's like, something that will make you feel better to start changing is being outside, just getting vitamin D, just being outside. And he's like, after that, you just got to do the next right thing for your body. Just don't try to fix everything all at once. Just do the next right thing and the next right thing and the next right thing, and it'll snowball and you're going to feel so much better. And he's like, I really want you to get your stress under control first and foremost, because if your cortisol levels are super high, your body is holding on to that fat for dear life because, your ancestry is Black and Irish and Scottish. And both of these different, like Nigerian and Benin Togo, all these different genetic factors that I had, these people in my past, these ancestors, all went through starvation. So your body is already preconditioned to
Okay, I
hold on to it.
have you read this book?
What is it?
It's called My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. And like I hereby recommend this to you based on what you're saying and talking about. But yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'll put it in the description. Oh my goodness. Can you message me that book, please, so I can
Yes.
put it in there?
Put it on my to-do list because I have goldfish brain, and if I don't write it down immediately, I will forget. So
I feel that. But he was essentially telling me that because of my DNA, my genetic markers, my body is already predisposed to, if it feels like I'm starving in any way, shape, or form, it's going to hold on to the fat, which also adds into hypothyroidism because your thyroid gland is your gland in your neck, for those that don't know, that regulates your pituitary gland, goes down to your thyroid, and your thyroid sends the hormones throughout your body. If your thyroid gland is not working, you could be feeling cold all the time, which I am. And plus, I have very tiny veins, so my circulation sucks dick. Anyway, it sucks really bad. So you could be cold all the time. You have digestion issues. Um,
every homeostatic and metabolic process in your body is regulated by your hormones. So it's like, yeah, if your thyroid isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, like everything's gonna be out of whack.
exactly. Exactly. So he was like, you just got to start on stress first, and please do not starve yourself. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't even eat a lot in general. I've already noticed that about myself. It's like I don't eat a lot in general, and I do exercise every day. I was like, what is going on? He's like, you're stressed out. And so your body's like, oh, she's not eating a lot. Let me hold it. Let me grab it. And I'm not letting it go. So you gotta slow yourself, slow your stress, and do everything in your power to limit stressful things. And he was like, I want you to sit down and make a list of every single thing that stresses you out. Because this was also part of the clinical trial.
Mhm.
And dude, that list was long.
Mm.
It was an expansive list. And most of it was out of my control. But the things that were in my control, the top of the list that always came up was my mother. Anything that had to do with my mom stressed me out. And anything that had to do with my dad's death stressed me out. Not my dad, but my dad's like death, because there's a lawsuit going on for my
Mhm.
dad's death because it's he got hit by a car. So it's like there's a lawsuit and I'm one of the key witnesses. So it's like, how can we limit that stress? So he was like, I want you to email your lawyer and say, do not contact me unless it is something that you need immediately. Okay. If we're going to schedule something, schedule it a month in advance. Do not contact me. Please stop giving me constant updates. They're not helpful. They're not helping me. They're hindering me. That stress, gone. I feel so much better. I could not care less about that lawsuit. I don't care if there's any money involved, none of it. I don't care because it's not within my fishbowl of concern.
Mhm.
You say there's the fishbowl of concern. Okay. What's in your immediate little fishbowl? He's like, you don't need to worry about the ocean out there. You just got to worry about your little fishbowl. So, what do you need? You need food, you need to sleep, and you need to take care of your little enclosure, which my house, take care of it.
Mhm.
And I saw this quote on Instagram that was like, just you need to enrich your enclosure.
I like that.
And it's like, just like with the little hamster, how, hamsters can get freaking bored and off themselves. Imagine that you are that little hamster. Enrich your enclosure. Bring things into your space that provide you with joy. I don't know, there's like a whole, like, whatever. If it doesn't give you joy, you got to throw it away. Don't do that, please.
Sparks joy or the Marie Kondo like movement.
Yeah.
I think there was something you had just said where I can't think of like what you had just said, but it made me think of, one of the other things that like in my dissertation too that I'm talking about with the importance of embodiment work is like, if you're not aware of what's happening in your body, if you're not aware of where your body is, like how do you recognize your boundaries or when someone or something has crossed those boundaries? And so it's like even being able to like do that somatic work to get back in your body, like gives you this whole different sense of agency over your life. Like you were just saying, where it's like you're allowed to set boundaries like that. And you're allowed to be upset when people cross or violate those boundaries. And it just gives you so much of your own, yeah, power and agency back when we feel like we know where our bounds are.
That's very, very true. Yeah. And part of my boundary is if someone is intentionally avoiding me and they don't want anything to do with me, then I'm not going to keep pursuing them. Because that was a big problem for me growing up. I have a narcissistic mother that constantly discarded me and then would come back and then discard me. And she would always make it, my responsibility as the child to seek out her approval or seek out like any form of care. And so that was very ingrained in me. And I have to unlearn that and be like, no, no, mm-mm. I gotta provide for myself. And if someone doesn't want to be around me, I can't just anxiously pursue them. Like, okay, I gotta let them go. Let them do what they're gonna do. They're gonna come back. I also have to put in that boundary of being like, okay, why did you come back?
Mm, that's a
Like,
good one.
why,
Mhm,
why are you here? Do you
mhm,
acknowledge what you did to me, or is this just you think you can just come back? Like,
mhm. Or like skip the whole like repairing the conflict part and skip the whole accountability part where it's like they just kind of like slide back in where they're like, are you over it? Like, yes, no. And then like maybe they'll like retreat again if you're not, or if you are, they're like, okay, we're not gonna like talk about any of that stuff that just happened. But like conflict is a form of intimacy. And, sometimes relationships are a lot stronger that have been through conflict and repaired it than haven't been at all. But I literally call that the hey text. I'm like, look out for the hey text. It can come in many forms, but it's people just checking, are you over it? It's just them peeking in, hey, and then they might disappear again or whatever comes
yep.
next.
Oh yeah, 100%. And yeah, conflict is a form of intimacy. Like if you are like I say this with any relationships, you are allowed to disagree with people. That's what I told to the friend that was like she was upset with me. I was like, well, let's go into this. She was upset with me because she suddenly stopped her psychiatric medicine cold turkey. And I told her that that wasn't a good idea. That is literally all I said. I said, that is not a good idea. And then she got into it. She was like, why do you think that's not a good idea? It's my body, it's my choice. I'm like, okay, well, you have psychiatric medicine for a reason. You were diagnosed with something. You were given medicine that has helped you, and you have now decided to stop taking it. I cannot sympathize with you. That is what I said. And she was like, what, you can't sympathize with me? I was like, no, because I've been on, hypothyroidism medicine for a long time. And then I've also been on psychiatric medicine for a long time, anti-seizure medicine for a long time. Yeah, I'm feeling great, but that's because of the medicine, not because my body just suddenly healed itself. When you're prescribed medication, it's usually because you have a deficit in something. And so that medication is filling that deficit. You don't have medication just to make you feel better, it's to help you regulate what is lacking. And
Mhm.
if you're suddenly going to stop taking your medicine and you're going to experience like conflict and consequences of it, I'm not going to be the person that you can come to bitch about it. That's what I said. I was like, I'm not, I'm not, because you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, well, you shouldn't have stopped your medicine. And she was mad about that. She was mad about that. And then she let that fester into anything. And she told me, she's like, well, I don't want to talk to you because you think you're right. I was like, okay, all right then. And then she didn't want to be involved in any wedding planning. And I'm like, you're the fucking maid of honor. And I confronted her. I was like, hey, you're the maid of honor. Are you? I first said this. I was like, is the maid of honor too much responsibility for you? Would you like me to like take some of that responsibility off and give it to someone else? She was like, no, no, no. I want that responsibility. I want to be the maid of honor. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna circle back to you in a little bit to like, let's start planning. And then I texted her like a couple weeks later. I was like, hey, can we start planning? She's like, planning for what? It's like, my wedding planning. She's like, what exactly do you need planning for? I was like, okay, yeah, no, yeah, no. And so I contacted one of my dearest friends because of this podcast. Her name is Catlin. She and I talk every single day almost. She's
Mhm.
amazing, amazing, amazing person. And she, from the get-go that she found out I was engaged, has been helping plan for stuff, has already bought her bridesmaid dress, has already like helped figure out where the venue, everything. And I was like, I don't think she should be the maid of honor. And she was like, okay, give her some time, give her a month, and then circle back. Month passed. I circled back. I'm like, Kat, it's over. And she's like, yeah, it's over. Like you gotta pull the plug. You gotta pull the plug on this one. And I told um this girl, I was like, hey, you can't be my maid of honor anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, um, yeah, no. And she was like, okay, I understand. And then she never talked to me again. And I kept asking her for help because, I was moved to this place. I was like, hey, can you help me? And my fiance and her boyfriend, we thought were friends. He's tried to hang out with him, kept getting ghosted, kept getting ghosted all the time. And he called him several times saying, hey, can you help me move? Because he said previously he would help move. Ghosted, ghosted, ghosted over and over. And so I even reached out to him, was like, hey, can you help us move? Hey, girl, can you help us move? Ghosted. And the day that we moved, they went to a big party with their other friends. So we were like, all right, we know they're alive. We know they're like doing stuff with other people. And me and my fiance had to have that conversation of like, okay, they're off the island. Um, they're not going to be included and other things anymore because if they can't show up for us when we need them and they're showing up for other people that they don't know as well as they know us,
Mhm.
um, that's a problem, and we're not gonna keep that in our space because that's not okay. We're not
Mhm.
gonna That's not okay. We're not gonna do it anymore. And so, yeah, they're off the island. For something so small as a disagreement, because you're allowed to disagree with people.
Mhm.
Like, conflict is a part of any relationship. Like, anger is a tool that's necessary, and it's not something inherently negative. No emotion is my emotion wheel. No emotion
And I
is
thought, I was like, yay.
yeah. Um, no emotion is inherently negative. They just have different consequences for different things. Consequences is not negative either. When
No,
I was a nanny for
yes,
four
humans
boys.
put labels on things, and they're just are. They're not good, bad, right, wrong. They just are.
Exactly. I was a nanny to four boys for 7 years, and I would tell them, your actions have consequences, and consequences aren't negative. They just exist. Everything is on a spectrum of whatever. It's like
Mhm.
if you fall off your bike, the consequence of that could be you hurt your leg. Or if you fall off your bike, the consequence of that could be, okay, I need to adjust the way that I'm sitting on my bike, maybe not be standing on the seat that I fall off, and figure that out. And
Mhm.
I think when you teach yourself, hey, consequences are not negative or positive, they just are, it really, really helps everything. And, a consequence of her or avoiding me and saying she literally said that she was avoiding me, saying that she was avoiding me is that I'm not going to allow her, access to me anymore. Because if you're avoiding me in a time of there is no turmoil, there is no upsetness because you're frustrated with me, that means you don't accept my input as a person. And friendships are supposed to be mutual. If you're now denying me access to you because you don't, we don't have to agree, but you don't want to accept any of my input, that's not a friendship. Okay? I I can't be constantly supporting you, and then when I need support, that you're nowhere to be found.
Mhm.
That's just not it. It ain't it, homie. I'm not here for it.
Mhm.
Goodbye.
Sexuality is such an important part of relationships, and I think it's like a John Gottman, who's like a researcher on relationships, like shoot, what is the word that he uses? But he says like if you can't accept like influence in a marriage, like he researches marriages a lot, there's an 86% chance a marriage will not work out if you cannot accept influence from your partner. And I imagine that it's got to be pretty comparable for friendships, or it's like if you can't take someone's input, opinions, advice, whatever, anything into consideration, like how could the relationship work?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the same thing with your own body. Your body is telling you things. If you're not going to accept or listen or take into account what your body is saying, girl,
Not
your
gonna.
body gonna fail you. Your body
Mm.
gonna be like, all right, I'm out. Peace.
Yep. Chronic illness deluxe.
Exactly. Oh, how has your daily routine changed on your, ever increasing knowledge on somatic embodiment work?
I think this is a hard question. I was talking about this with someone in my cohort recently, where one of our professors had asked us in a class where she was like, how do you use mindfulness skills like between sessions with clients, like to kind of just like get back to your baseline, like before holding space for someone else? And I was like, I don't know if I do. And then it wasn't until like a few weeks later I was thinking about it that I was like, I feel like sometimes those things just become so like ingrained that you like forget that you're doing it, where it's like I think at first you have to be like intentional about building habits and practicing things, but then like over time it just becomes so ingrained that you don't even realize that you're doing it some of the time. And I think, being a graduate student and working, I'm all too familiar with burnout. And I think I sometimes do have a problem with neglecting my body just with, the responsibilities and obligations and deadlines that do come up. Um, but like in an ideal world, there's this YouTube channel where it's yoga with Kassandra with a K, and she does 10-minute yoga videos, where it's like if you want the benefits of yoga, but you're like, I can't sit through a whole class, or if you're like me and you're like, I have ADHD and it's very difficult, I think, for me to stay like focused on a task for like that period of time, like the 10-minute bite-sized videos are like a really good way for me to start my morning and start my day. I think like a part of it is just the grounding and trying to be as intentional as possible with the things that I'm doing. But I think also a piece is just giving myself context, where it's like reminding myself, yeah, all of my emotions make sense in the context of my experience. And so just giving myself grace and compassion and permission to feel everything that comes up when it does. And you had kind of touched on like a reparenting and inner child. And I think that's also been something really big for me that feels a lot more like natural or automatic as I do it, or especially when I'm having like a big emotion. It's like I do like a quick inner child meditation and I'm like, yeah, like how would I want to nurture this part of myself that is having a difficult time letting itself be known? Like how can I invite yeah, I was like, I have another book to my right. You can tell I've been giving stuff to clients today. So this book is called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. Um, and like it does just talk about like all of those parts of self and how we hold space for them and navigate them together. And so I think doing kind of inner child and like letting, the protectors go and holding space for like the exiled parts of self is um yeah, like I feel like that sounds like a lot, but I feel like when you like get in the habit of doing a lot of these things, like it just becomes more ingrained in the way that you start to think and show up.
It really, really does. It really, really does. Because, from my own experiences, I was talking about it earlier. I've been theater my whole life. Like these warm-ups that I have done constantly every day, it's second nature. Before I would ever go on stage, because I did it professionally for a very long time, before I would go on stage, I would leave myself and go into the character. And then I would have to come back out of it and feel how I felt and acknowledge whether I did a good job or a bad job. Because some days I would not be doing so hot. Some days, what somebody else, because acting is being able to be influenced. It's acting is reacting. So sometimes I felt like I wasn't doing a good job because other people weren't doing a good job either. And I acknowledged it. And I told, because we were supposed to give, you know, concrete criticism and critiques to other actors that we were interacting with, of being like, hey, I didn't appreciate if you touch me here or something like that when we're on a piece, because you have to be okay with the other actor. And for me, one time when I was on stage with this guy who was supposed to be playing my romantic partner, mind you, I was 15 at the time, we were doing Grease and I was Frenchie. And he had grabbed my waist and had pulled me in to where my chest was touching his. And I was not okay with my boobas touching his chest. Ain't no way. I was not okay. I was not okay with that. And I told my director, and he was like, okay, well, you need to go tell him, because I can't just be the only one to tell him. I will also. But you got to stand up for yourself. This is your body. This is your autonomy. You have control over your own autonomy. You have to tell the other person. Okay.
Mhm.
And he's like, and do it in a kind way. And I was like, okay. Hi. Um, I just wanted to let you know that I do not want to be touched anywhere here. And he was like, well, I didn't touch you there. I was like, you pulled me in to where our chests were touching. I just want to let you know that I do not want to be touched here. And he was like, okay, constructive. He thought that I meant, when people are like, oh, you touched me, hands. No,
Mhm.
it's like, do not touch my chest. And it was constructive and it helped me all out, helped me feel safer with,
Mhm.
your scene partner, and helped me have control over my own bodily autonomy, being like, this is my own bubble, even though I'm portraying another character. My
Mhm.
boundaries as Grace are still the same as Frenchie or as whatever.
Mhm.
And I really hope more often that people are bringing in boundary workshops into acting, because when I was in it, because I had to take a step back, with my dad dying and everything, I took a step back from everything. So now I'm kind of getting back into it with teaching and stuff like that. But I'm hoping that people are hearing this, listening, that we have control over our own autonomy, and making a boundary doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you are restricting another person. It just means that you're enabling yourself to feel safe in your own body. And it's okay to have boundaries, even if you're portraying another character. It's okay to have boundaries, because you still have to feel safe to be able to do the work or any work. And dude, you gotta feel safe in your body, because if you
Mhm.
don't feel safe in your body's going to tell you that it doesn't feel safe, and it's going to cause you some problems.
We basically can't do anything if we don't feel safe in our bodies. Like we can't, period. Actually, that's it.
Yeah, we can't, period. Speaking directly to our listeners, what would be your message about somatic embodiment work?
Mm. Trying to think of how to say it concisely. But I think it's, part of coming home to yourself and being able to show up authentically as yourself, means being able to do this work. And I think, one of the benefits of, mindfulness work that I'm kind of lumping in with this, you had said earlier, it's like, you can do it absolutely anywhere, anytime. And whether you're, severely experiencing mental illness, whether you just have a little bit of stress, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum. Like you can just show up better in the world as yourself if you start practicing some of these things. The world is an incredibly stressful place to exist. And I genuinely believe the world can be such a better place if we all just are able to grow our emotional health and intelligence and show up curious and as authentic versions of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful. Do you have any resources or recommendations you'd like to share?
The two books that I just read, I feel like the first one, the My Grandmother's Hands, I'm like, if I had like Devon's list of essential reading for all human beings, I feel like this one's for sure on that list. No Bad Parts. I think just as far as welcoming every part of you home with embodiment is important. Um, I might have like all my books around me. I'm like trying to look around. Um, mm, I feel like I do have like on the fence with like The Body Keeps the Score, but like there is a lot of very good information in that book. Like for context, like trigger warning, like Bessel van der Kolk, the author, was accused of sexual harassment. And so some people have been like straying away a little bit more from his book and his research, but I do think there is a lot of value with the content that is in that book, just about like how trauma affects the body, how disembodiment affects the way that we show up in the world. Um, but I'm sure I'm gonna think of like 10 more resources as soon as we
Well, you can
yeah.
text them to me and
Okay.
I will put them in the links
Okay.
in the description. So for all of you guys listening, everything that we're talking about here are going to be in the description. Check them out at your own time, on your own pace. Don't rush it. Whatever you feel like you need to learn, you can do it. I believe in you. We believe in you. You
Yes.
are more than capable.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Devon, for sharing with us. Thank you for talking about embodiment, talking about your own personal life. It really means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you for creating this space and holding space for this conversation today.
Hell yeah. You guys can go follow Devon on TikTok. Her TikTok is Devon Caley.
Yes.
That is DevonCaleyy. So go check her out. Go follow her. Some support. Ooh. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
If you're watching us on YouTube, here are our memes of the week, carefully curated from the amazing people over on our Discord server. Now let's get into those memes. If you're liking what we're doing here on the Trauma Dump podcast, please share this episode with your friends. It really helps us out a lot. It helps the channel grow, it helps you grow, and it helps other people become trauma informed. At the end of every episode, we spin our wheel of emotions to learn a new feeling and how it correlates to trauma. Ooh, scared, terrified, frightened. Okay. Dude. We were talking about somatic embodiment work this entire podcast, and immediately what comes to my mind is whenever I'm scared or terrified or frightened, we got the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. I fight. Whenever I'm scared, I either fight or I flee, but usually I fight. And whenever I'm scared, I get very loud and very angry. And a way for me to soothe that fear is to hug myself and calm myself down by hugging Gigi, my service dog, or hugging my partner, my fiance Joey. And that helps me regulate because I start to listen to their heartbeat and breathe with them. And it really, really helps me get out of that fear, because fear is something that we do need to survive. Fear does keep you safe. But in this world where we're not being, hunted by predators anymore, usually, fear is about loss more often than not. And acknowledging that fear and accepting that fear, and then soothing yourself when you cannot do anything about that fear, is really, really helpful. In the description, I have a lot of different links where you can check out different somatic embodiment exercises that you may try at home that may work for you. But otherwise, if you guys ever have any anxiety or any fears, please reach out to us in our Discord. In our Discord channel, we have a lot of different channels where you can talk openly about what you're going through. We have a lot of different areas of discussion that can be really beneficial. And, it's always good to talk about these things, because it really helps us understand that we're not alone, and that we can get through it. You can get through it. I know how hard it is to be afraid, but you don't have to go through it alone. Our podcast seeks to forge a strong community, so please don't hesitate to join our Discord, okay? You are needed here, and I appreciate you, and I'd love to meet you, know you, and support you in whatever way that I can. And special thanks goes out to all of those Discord users listening right now. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of our community. If you'd like to support our podcast, we have a Patreon. Different tiers can get you a bracelet. That's a handmade bracelet made by me, Grace, like these ones on my wrist. Or you can get a sticker like the one on my computer. We also have merch on Bonfire, where you can get custom apparel designed by yours truly. All of those links are in our description. Any support helps us out a lot, so if you feel compelled to, please like, subscribe, share, and rate the show if you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Really, rating the show helps us out a lot. It helps it reach out to other people who may need this podcast. Remember, you are capable of a fulfilling life in spite of your circumstances and your trauma. May you rise again from the ashes and be filled with peace, hope, love, joy, and understanding. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Mwah! Goodbye!